Welcome to Movie Caps. Today I will show you a thriller film from 2016 titled The Accountant. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. A couple takes their son, Chris, to an institute for children with autism hoping to get some insight. They explain that because the husband is in the army, they have to move around a lot, and the director offers to let Chris live there. The husband refuses, explaining that Chris doesn't need to be kept away from the things that make him upset. He needs to be forced to deal with them because that's how the world works. In a waiting room, Chris chants nursery rhymes to himself as he works on a puzzle. He gets down to the last piece but can't find it and starts having a meltdown. A little girl finds the missing piece and gives it to him and he calms down. Present day, Chris works as an accountant. He sits in his office with a couple having financial troubles and coaches them in all the ways to file their taxes so that they save the most money. They are very grateful and the husband offers to let Chris come practice shooting on their property anytime he wants. The director of the United States Treasury, a man by the name of King, calls an analyst, Medina, into his office to talk to her. He praises her accomplishments and asks why she hasn't moved on to higher things. She says she enjoys just being an analyst, but he accuses her of lying. He pulls up arrest records from her youth and tells her that it's illegal to lie on a federal job application, and that her record should have prevented her from getting her position. He tells her that she has to work on a special project for him if she wants to keep her job. He shows her pictures of a man known as the accountant and all of the criminals he works with. He helps them keep track of their illegal money and has also been known to take lives. King tells Medina he wants her to figure out this man's identity and resolve the case by the end of the month or she'll lose her job. Chris goes home and makes himself dinner. Before going to bed, he turns on strobe lights and heavy metal music and painfully massages his shins with a wooden rod. He has flashbacks of his mother leaving their family when he was a child at Christmas. Chris takes his medication and goes to bed. Sometime later, he goes to his client's property to practice shooting and the man is very surprised at how good of a shot Chris is. Chris drives to his storage unit where he keeps his trailer. Inside he has very expensive collectibles and paintings and all kinds of money and different currencies. He also has a very large stash of weapons. He lies down on his bed and has a flashback of when he was in prison. He was mentored by his cellmate who taught him different social skills and set him up for his job handling money for dangerous criminals. Chris wakes up to his phone ringing and he answers. A British woman who obviously works for him advises him to pick up some normal clients because she can tell people are starting to get suspicious of him. He reluctantly agrees to take on a typical client. He goes into a meeting with his new clients who run a robotics prosthetics company. One of their in-house accountants found out that someone within the company is taking money from their profits and they want to hire Chris to figure out what's going on. Chris agrees to take the job and says he'll start the next morning. Medina looks through the pictures she has and zooms in on one with part of the accountant's face visible. She crops the photo and sends it to the face mapping department for analysis. Brax, a dangerous man hired to hold businessmen accountable for laundering money, enters a man's car in a parking garage in Switzerland before he is able to drive away. He holds a gun to his head and makes him promise to stop shorting other companies their money. Brax has to beat him up, but eventually the man agrees and that is cue to leave. Chris goes to the conference room where he's been allowed to work for the company and finds a woman asleep at the conference table. He awkwardly wakes her up and she apologizes. She introduces herself as Dana, the woman who found out that there was money missing in the first place. She gives him a rundown of the situation and assumes that they'll be working together, but Chris makes it clear that he prefers to work alone. She leaves the conference room and Chris gets to work. During a press conference, Medina gets a phone call from Homeland Security about the facial recognition request. They've identified an audio clip from one of his attacks of a man begging for his life right before the accountant kills him. They send the audio file over to Medina. At lunch, Dana sits next to Chris and tries to make conversation. Chris tries to socialize as best as he can, but it's clear he isn't very good at it. Dana talks about her father and how he's the reason she got into accounting. Chris returns to the conference room and does so much math on the whiteboard provided for him that he has to continue on the surrounding windows. He covers the entire room with his work until he has a breakthrough. Medina listens to the audio file over and over again at home and uses her technology to isolate the accountant's vocals. She is able to make out him chanting a nursery rhyme to himself. Chris excitedly shows Dana his work in the conference room and tells her that he's identified a leak in the money. Someone is routing money to a company that doesn't exist. One of the shareholders of the company interrupts them and asks Chris for results, but he tells her he doesn't have a final answer yet and that he needs more time before he can say for sure who is taking the money. Brax visits one of the shareholders of the robotics company at his home in the middle of the night, He commands him to get insulin from the fridge and bring it over to the table, and that he can either inject himself with the insulin and make his death look like a suicide so that his wife can collect on his life insurance policy, or he can try to fight back and Brax will kill both him and his wife. The man decides to inject himself. When Chris gets to the conference room the next day, custodians are inside erasing his work from the windows. He tells them to stop, and the owner of the company comes in to explain that his best friend, the shareholder, killed himself last night over guilt of stealing money from the company, and he wants Chris to stop working on the case. Chris is very upset that he didn't get to finish what he started. Chris goes home and has an intense session of beating himself on the shins with his wooden rod while he listens to heavy metal music and turns on the strobe lights. He has another flashback of his mom leaving the family, and he breaks the rod over his shin and throws his bottle of medication. He calms down and takes his meds and goes to bed. The next morning, when he leaves the house, a car follows him. Chris goes to his client's property to practice shooting again. He has a flashback from his childhood of fighting with his brother, Brax, and a trainer his dad hired. The trainer beats them and they are covered in cuts and bruises. The trainer wants to call it for the day, but their dad says they haven't had enough. He makes the boys get up and keep fighting. Inside the house, the two clients are being held hostage by a couple of thugs. They demand that the wife go outside to call Chris in so they can get to him. When a thug escorts her to the front door, Chris shoots him from the yard. The other thug forces the couple to get in their truck and drive them from their property. Chris shoots at the truck, causing it to stop, and drags the thug from the vehicle. Chris strangles the man with his belt and demands to know who he is working for. The man says he doesn't know who is in charge, just that he was told to kill Chris and Dana. Chris kills the man and leaves the property, heading for Dana's house. A man follows Dana to her apartment complex, and Chris arrives just in time to see him get into the elevator with her. Chris sneaks into the back of the building and climbs the stairs. Dana gets to her apartment and two delivery men say they have a package for her. They shove their way into the apartment and try to subdue her, but she fights back and goes to hide in the bathroom. Chris breaks into the apartment and kills the two men and tells Dana to come with him. Brax gets a call that his men have been killed by the accountant. Chris takes Dana to his trailer and tells her to wait outside while she gets ready. She comes inside anyway and sees all of his money and weapons. She questions him about them, but he is unable to give her any direct answers. Medina gets a call from language services about the audio file she sent them. They tell her that the man she's looking for could be a victim of childhood abuse or could have some kind of neurological disorder that causes him to chant the nursery rhyme in times of stress. Medina heads to the IRS offices and works with an employee to try and cross-reference the accountant's aliases with people who have high incomes. Chris takes Dana to a fancy hotel to hide out, and she questions him about his fighting abilities. He tells her that his dad was in the army and made him train to be able to stand up to bullies. He also tells her that he has autism and that it's very hard for him to socialize even though he really wants to. Dana tells him a story about a dress she really wanted in high school, so she learned how to gamble and count cards so she could buy it. She only wore it once, but she just wanted it to try to fit in with the other kids. The two share an emotional moment and Dana leans in to kiss him, but Chris pulls away, having a revelation about the robotics case. He tells her that someone was funneling money out of the company only to put it back in and make even higher profits. Sometime later, Chris follows Brax down the street and Brax notices and shoots at him. Chris continues following him and ends up in one of the shareholders' hotel rooms and sees that she's been shot dead. Medina works with the employee at the IRS office and is able to figure out the accountant's real name, Chris, and that he works as an accountant at a small firm in a building connected to a bunch of cash businesses that he owns and runs his money through to hide how much he's actually making. Medina calls King with this information and she tells him that most of the money that Chris makes is donated to neuroscience organizations. When Chris gets back to the hotel, he finds Dana asleep on the couch. He has a flashback of his father forcing him and his brother to beat up a group of kids who had bullied him at school earlier that day. Chris decides that it's too dangerous to keep Dana involved and he packs up his things and leaves. King and Medina lead a team of investigators through Chris's house and they take note of all of his odd living habits. They find that he has a lot of weapons without serial numbers on them and a very high-tech security system. Brax is hired by the owner of the robotics company to set up security cameras in his house in case Chris tries to come after him. King dismisses the other investigators and he and Medina stay behind in the house to talk. He asks Medina to tell him about the details of her arrest and she tells him that she tried to kill a drug dealer that was selling it to her sister and that she doesn't regret her choices. King tells Medina about how long he's been trying to track down the accountant and the hardships he's gone through in order to get this far. He tells her he was at the hotel where the audio of Chris was recorded, and that he overheard him killing the man. Afterwards, Chris held him at gunpoint and asked him if he was a good father. When King said yes, Chris let him go. He took Chris, sparing his life as a sign to quit, and just as he was about to leave his office for good, he got a call from a woman with a British accent with tips about an upcoming illegal deal. He decided to stay on the force, using the woman calling as an informant. King interviewed Chris's cellmate, who was a federal informant after he was imprisoned for helping criminals with their money. When they finally let him free, the people he used to work for found him, tortured him, and killed him. When one of the guards told Chris about his cellmate's death, Chris freaked out and escaped the prison. He later attended his mother's funeral with his father, but when they were asked to leave, Chris had a meltdown. A security officer shot at Chris, but his father stepped in front of the bullet and died. Medina asks why King is telling her all of this, and he tells her that he wants Medina to be the one who answers the phone for the British woman after he retires in 7 months. The landline in Chris's house rings and Medina answers it. The British woman is on the other end of the line and she gives Medina a tip about the robotics company. Brax is at the company owner's house when Chris comes onto the property. Brax sends out some of his men, and Chris kills all but one, who he saves to interrogate about the layout of the house. Brax watches from the security cameras as he sends his men to Chris and tries to give them orders on how to bring him down. Chris sustains several injuries, but manages to kill all of the men Brax sends towards him and enter the house. While Brax watches the security footage, he recognizes Chris as his brother and orders his men to stand down. Brax goes to Chris and the company owner takes his place watching the cameras. At first, Brax is furious at Chris for not being able to get a hold of him for over 10 years, and he's upset that Chris went to their mother's funeral. Brax blames Chris for their father's death and Chris lets Brax hit him to release some of his anger. Chris takes control of the situation and holds Brax at gunpoint until he calms down. The two brothers make up. The company owner walks into the room, confused and upset that Brax hasn't taken care of Chris. Chris shoots the company owner and resumes talking to his brother. Before Chris leaves, he promises to meet up with Brax in a week so they can catch up. Another set of parents visit the neuroscience center seeking advice about their son with autism. Their son wanders into one of the rooms and finds Justine, the director's daughter. She was the same little girl that helped Chris with his puzzle when he was a child. The director explains that Justine is nonverbal, but communicates using a very high-tech laptop. When Justine demonstrates how she communicates, the voice the computer emits is the same British woman that works with Chris. Dana goes back to her apartment to clean up and gets a delivery. She opens it to find a classic painting, but upon further inspection, she sees that the outer canvas is just concealing what's on the inside. She rips the outer layer off and reveals a very expensive painting she recognizes from Chris's trailer. The end. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this.